Welcome to this short video on the Time Processing System application. The Time Processing System application helps teams and organizations manage hours across products, releases, and tasks within the business. Managing and overseeing an employee's hours can be troublesome. Between licensing fees and application overhead, choosing the correct solution proves difficult. The Time Processing System provides all the functionality needed for users to submit, review, and report on timesheets with the ease and convenience of SBM. The Time Processing System consists of two applications, Time Processing System and the Time Processing System Task, or TPS Task. The Time Processing System is the driving application which contains weekly timesheets for any employee. The TPS Task application is where a record is held for each specific task associated with the Time Processing System timesheet. Information such as task, product, and release are stored here. Now that we are in the timesheet application in Work Center, you can see that I have a few already submitted items, some with the start date of 5/15 and 5/8. We will use these later in the demo. Let's start the submit transition for a timesheet. Here is the submit form. This is where a user will record their work in regards to a product, release, and task. This form has many customizations to it. If you would like to make changes or modifications, you will have to do so in the JavaScript attached to this form in Composer. We will begin by selecting a start date for this timesheet. As you can see, only Mondays are selectable values. This is our mark for the beginning of a week. This is also editable in the JavaScript attached to this form. If we select a week in a timesheet that already exists, we will receive an error with a message that will link you to an already existing item. So if I choose 5/15, you can see that a message in red appears saying you already have a time card for this week. If you click on it, it'll take you to the timesheet that already exists. Let's select a fresh week to submit this card into. We will now enter the task, product, and release. I'd like to note here that in the JavaScript, there are rules on certain tasks that require product and release to be filled out. If you have one of these tasks, you will see a red pulse around the area that needs completion. So let's fill out the product and release, and select Add Row. I'd also like to note that if you try to add a row with the same parameters with product, release, and task, you will also receive a red pulse around the area on the form that they already exist. We will begin filling out the hours for this task. As you can see, as we start filling out hours in the item, the total hours worked is continually updated. There's a rule that once you reach 40 hours or above, the text will turn green, notifying you that you have reached the week's acceptable amount of hours worked. Another nice feature on this form is the Save as Template button. When you click on the button, a pop-up will appear saying that your template has been saved and your rows have been saved. I'd like to also note here that these do not include the hours of those tasks. It will only include the product, release, and task as a blank row. To show you this, I will exit out and start the submit transition again. As you can see, the product, release, and task that we previously had is now filled out in the form. I will now fill out all the fields in which we had before. Once I click OK, it'll finish the submit transition. Here is the state form. All the information is neatly shown here. As you can see, it shows the state and owner of the item. It also shows all the information that we input on the previous screen, such as the start date, task, release, product, and total amount of hours associated with that task. The System tab shows the employee as well as the manager if you have the process app configured using resources from SBM admin. I do, so if I refresh this page, I should see that my manager field is now filled in. The notes and attachments section is if any notes and attachments during this process were included, they would be shown here. And the last tab is the history tab, which shows the state change history as well as the change history. As an employee, I now have the option to either update the item with more rows or submit the item to my manager. I will click the Submit for Review. Once I've submitted for review, I will no longer have the option to update this item. Instead, it will be up to my manager to do so. I will now log in as my manager. On the Activities tab for the timesheet application, I can see that I have an item waiting for me. If I click on it, I can either return this item to the submitter or approve it, which will take it to its final and completed state. When the item is transitioned to the completed state, each individual task associated with that timesheet is also transitioned to its closed state. Now I will talk a little bit about the timesheet's auto submission. The auto submission is the auto creation of timesheets for a given group. The auto creation of timesheets means that it will only create blank timesheets for users in a given group. The users will have to update and submit them every week themselves. To set this up, you will need to follow the configuration instructions in the Time Processing System Configuration Guide. I will only be showing a little bit from the perspective of an administrator. I will need to create a fresh timesheet for the administrator to kick off the auto creation. Once I have this item created, I will want to go to the More's drop-down action list and click on the Admin Activate Flag transition. As you can see, there's a field that needs to be set called Activate Flag. In the notification, there's a rule that says when the Activate Flag is switched from no to yes, it will kick off the auto creation of the timesheets. So if we go ahead and do that here, in a few moments when I refresh this item, I should see another transition called. I can see that another transition was actioned called Admin Create TPS Items. This is the transition that calls the auto submit orchestration in Composer and begins the kickoff of auto creation. So if I go back to Work Center, I should be able to see that many other items were created that were not Dustin or Administrator. Here you can see that items for Joe Manager, Chris Tester, Carmen, and Carol have been created. And that shows the functionality of the auto creation of timesheets. The Time Processing System application can also be configured to work with outside sources. Here I have an aux table named Integration. As you can see, I have two rows detailing information related to a timesheet, as the employee Dustin. To show the power of SBM's integration, I have created an orchestration in Composer that will pull this information in and submit them into an already existing timesheet. To show this, I will have to go into Work Center as Dustin and go through this process. I would like to note here, if you keep track of the start date 5/29, we will use this as our submit date so that the item knows the correct date to pull the information into. Now that we are back in Work Center, we will want to go through the submit process for the time processing system again. As noted before, we will want to use the start date of 5/29 to match the auxiliary table data. And for task, product, and release, we just want to do something simple just to get it through so we can get to the integration phase. Now that this item is created, I will want to go into this More's drop-down list and click the integration transition. This transition is the transition that will pull that information in and submit it in this time card. If you click refresh, you should see that the two rows that we had submitted into the auxiliary table have now been pulled and submitted into this timesheet, thus demonstrating that the timesheet application can have integrations to outside data sources. This concludes the Time Processing System application demo. Thank you for watching and have a great day.